Average Joe's Drive-In is proudly sponsored by the Maine Cannababes. The Cannababes are a charity group of pro-cannabis women from the state of Maine who are bringing worthy attention to various causes in the medical cannabis community. This year, they launched their very first Maine Cannababes pinup calendar, which they are taking pre-orders for as we speak. All the proceeds from the calendar are going to worthy charitable causes. If you are interested in purchasing one or finding out more about the Cannababes, you can go to their website, www.maincannababes.com, or find them on most major forms of social media like Facebook and Instagram. If you order a calendar and enter the code word Average Joe's Drive-In, you could win a chance to get an autographed picture of your favorite Maine Cannababe. Once again, put in the code word Average Joe's Drive-In for a chance to win an autographed picture of your favorite Maine Cannababe.
Welcome to Average Joe's Drive-In, your weekly podcast on movies, music, games, and other things entertainment related. Now, your host, TJ Washburn.
Welcome to Average Joe's Drive-In, episode 19. I am your host, TJ Washburn, and let's kick off the 31 Days of Horror. I got a little bit of a jump start because of vacation scheduling, so I'm a little bit ahead, but here we go. Here are my reviews for the 31 Days of Horror. And up first is 1976's Carrie.
It's the night of the senior prom. The Bates High School gym is alive with excitement. Everybody is there, even Carrie White, the girl no one likes.
We're all sorry about this incident, Cassie.
It's Carrie!
And everyone makes fun of her.
Free, Carrie!
The girl who lives in that creepy house with her crazy mother.
Help the sinning woman see the sin of her days and ways. Show her that if she had remained sinless, the curse of blood would never have come on her.
The girl with the strange power.
If I concentrate hard enough, I can move things.
But tonight, no one will laugh at Carrie.
You don't have a date to the prom next Friday. Would you like to go with me?
She's with the best-looking boy in the senior class.
He's trying to trick me again.
She'll be voted queen of the prom.
You know, I can make sure that you don't hurt Carrie White anymore.
For Carrie, it will be a dream come true. For everyone else, it will be a nightmare. Carrie. A new film by Brian De Palma. Based on the chilling bestseller. Starring Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, and introducing John Travolta in his first motion picture role. If you have a taste for terror, you have a date with Carrie.
This Stephen King adaptation was directed by Brian De Palma, has a runtime of 98 minutes, an R rating, starring Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, Amy Irving, William Catt, John Travolta, and PJ Souls. I watched this on DVD. This film is loaded with future stars and great performances. The synopsis for this film: Carrie White, a shy, friendless teenage girl, was sheltered by her domineering religious mother, unleashes her telekinetic powers after being humiliated by her classmates at her senior prom. Another Stephen King adapted movie I hadn't seen for a while. I have seen the film a handful of times over the years, mostly edited down for cable TV.
Once I watched it on Showtime or HBO, and I believe that was the only time I've watched it unedited. I have the special edition DVD for a couple of years, but hadn't watched it yet. I figured now was as good a time as any to give it a revisit. First of all, I have to commend the score for being so blissfully awesome. It seemed almost out of place, but complements the tone of the movie so well. The cast of the film is solid, and they really come across as genuine in the characters. Sissy Spacek's portrayal of Carrie is heartbreaking and really pulls you into her performance. It's hard not to feel bad for her. The twisted perversion of religion by her insane mother is pulled off so well by Piper Laurie and does nothing but make you feel worse about Carrie's situation. That's both a testament to King's writing of the characters, the actress's performance, and De Palma's direction. The opening credit crawl in this film is both beautifully done and oddly creepy at the same time. You almost feel like you should be looking away, but it sets up the situation that is a catalyst for Carrie's eventual going off the deep end. So, it's such a key moment. Again, the score plays a huge role in making it all come together in just the right way. Anybody who's seen this film before will know exactly what I'm talking about in that opening crawl. Despite being over 40 years old, the film still holds up well. I think a lot of the commentary it makes about bullying and someone wanting to find their place amongst their peers is just as relevant today as it was then. It's one I am certainly going to watch again, except this time I don't plan on waiting as long in between views. Now I feel like I need to watch the remake and the sequel to the original, just because, neither of which I have seen. This rewatch has made me curious and spiked my interest in doing so. Guess I'll have to make that happen. My rating for this was an 8.0 out of 10. IMDb rating is 7.4 out of 10. Keeping on the Stephen King train, next up is 1989's Pet Semetary.
What is this place? I brought you here to bury Alan's cat.
Daddy, is church all right?
Why, Judd? I had my reasons.
I dreamed he got hit by a car and you and Mr. Crandall buried him in the pet cemetery.
What did we do tonight, Judd? What we did, Lois, was a secret.
May the Lord bless you and keep you.
Has anyone ever buried a person up there?
May the Lord make his face to shine upon you.
You're thinking thoughts best not thought of.
Daddy's gonna do something really bad.
You're thinking of putting him up there. Don't deny the thought hadn't crossed your mind.
Come back to me, Gage. Come back to us.
Paramount Pictures presents Stephen King's all-time best-selling tale of horror. Pet Semetary.
Pet Semetary was directed by Mary Lambert. As a rating, it was R rating, 103-minute runtime. It stars Dale Midkiff, Denise Crosby, and the late, great Fred Gwynne. I watched this on Blu-ray. The synopsis: behind a young family's home in Maine is a terrible secret that holds the power of life after death. When tragedy strikes, the threat of that power soon becomes undeniable. This is one of my favorite Stephen King books. It was one of the first 5 novels of his that I read when I first got into horror back in the early 90s. I never saw the movie until I was in high school or just out of high school. I can't remember. I fully remember the book creeping me out, maybe more than any other novel of his that I've read. I don't remember a lot about it detail-wise because it's been about 25 years since I read it. The film is a very solid adaptation of the book. I've seen it several times over the years, and I do enjoy it. I won't put it in the upper echelons of King's adapted works, but it's probably in the top 10.
I really do need to go through, watch, and rate the stuff that has been turned into film. What keeps this from being maybe higher up in the ranking is the fact it's really not that intense or creepy. It has its moments, but unlike films like The Shining, Carrie, or Misery, it just doesn't suck you in and skeeve you out, or have that intense connection with the characters. Don't get me wrong, it's a damn good film. It just feels a little too formulaic at times in the way it's presented. That doesn't hurt my enjoyment of it, but I also realize that it's not on the same level as those films, which in my honest opinion are horror masterpieces. I love the acting, and the effects are very well done for the most part. Zelda is still easily the creepiest thing about this film. Also, you can't help but love Fred Gwynne. Being from Maine, it's probably one of the best Maine accents I've heard used in a King film. There's a lot to love and enjoy about this film, and it has great rewatchability. Out of all the films of his I've seen, this one feels the most Maine-like to me. I think that has to do with the fact it was shot almost entirely in the Orrington, Bucksport, and Ellsworth areas, not far from where I live. This is a must-see for any King fan or fan of solid, well-made horror. My rating of this film is 6.5 out of 10. The IMDb rating is 6.6 out of 10. So pretty much spot on with what the average user rating on IMDb is. The last King film I have to talk about this week is 1983's The Dead Zone.
If the future were in your hands.
My daughter's screaming. The house is burning.
Would you change it?
Hurry up! It's not too late.
Touch this man's hand, and you are in the grip of the dead zone.
I've had another episode.
Only the imagination of author Stephen King could take you there.
Johnny, wait.
With a power that alters the future lives of those you love.
You want to kill your own son?
I want you out of here.
I'm scared, Dad.
Or of those you fear.
I have had a vision that I am going to be president of the United States someday, and nobody, I mean nobody, gonna stop me.
Is it a power for good or for evil?
If God has seen fit to bless you with this gift, you should use it.
Bless me?
You're a devil. Son of a man.
Who are you?
Who sent you?
I'm scared, son.
What's happening to me?
We're gonna get married. Johnny, don't leave me, please.
Don't you see how clear it all is? Not only can you see the future,
I can change it.
Skeleton! 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 Skeleton!
I was there, I saw it.
Put your hand on the scanning screen and you'll go down in history with me.
I saw his face. I stood there. I did nothing.
Johnny!
Stephen King, The Dead Zone.
This film was directed by David Cronenberg, has a R rating, 103-minute runtime, starring Christopher Walken, Brooke Adams, Tom Skerritt, and Martin Sheen. This film I watched on Amazon Prime. The synopsis for the movie. When Johnny Smith, Christopher Walken, awakes from a coma caused by a car accident, he finds that years have passed, and he now has psychic abilities. Heartbroken that his girlfriend, Brooke Adams, has moved on with her life, Johnny also must contend with his unsettling powers, which allow him to see a person's future with a mere touch. After shaking the hand of an aspiring politician, Greg Stilson, played by Martin Sheen, Johnny sees the danger presented by the candidate's rise and resolves to kill him. I saw The Dead Zone way back when I was like 13 or 14. I remembered very little about it. I do remember at the time I was kind of meh in my enjoyment of it. I had read the book shortly before viewing the film, and I think I remember liking the book better. I may have watched it once between now and then, but I honestly can't remember. So this year, for the 31 Days of Horror, I wanted to revisit some of the Stephen King adapted movies I hadn't seen in a while or never watched. The Dead Zone was right up there on the list. Needless to say, my excitement was piqued even more when I noticed it was available to watch with my Amazon Prime membership. What a great movie. I don't know what the hell I was thinking back in the day about not enjoying it that much, but my opinion there has changed for sure. I think some of it may be due to the fact I'm older now and appreciate the little moral quandaries that Johnny goes through. The cast is fantastic. I loved Walken as Johnny and Martin Sheen as the asshole senator wannabe, Greg Stilson. This was definitely a film where Christopher Walken got to shine and pretty much be the center of attention. The supporting performances were solid, though none of them really get that much screen time. Like I said, it's definitely Walken's show. My only major gripe with this film was it felt a little slow at times, and I felt like they could have expanded more on the part about the Castle Rock killer. That part felt rushed. If I remember correctly, it was more fleshed out in the book, but my memory may be serving me wrong there. The story takes place in Castle Rock, which is supposed to be in Maine, but the sheriffs are wearing New Hampshire logos on their uniforms. It's really nitpicky stuff, but it's things I noticed or made observations about. My rating on this is an 8 out of 10. IMDb rating is a 7.2 out of 10. Next up, I happened to recently pick both of these films up on VHS, and that is The Blair Witch Project and Blair Witch 2. So first up, my review of 1999's The Blair Witch Project.
I just want to apologize to Mike's mom and Josh's mom and my mom. I am so sorry, because it is my fault, because it was my project.
The search of the 3 missing Montgomery College students continues in Frederick County tonight.
10 days and thousands of man-hours have been unable to produce any clues.
We have a few leads, a few other options we want to take advantage of, and just try to put together some pieces to this puzzle.
Do you believe the occult may be involved in the disappearance of your son?
I am so scared.
This film was directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. It has a runtime of 81 minutes and an R rating. It stars Heather Donahue, Michael C. Williams, and Joshua Leonard. I watched this on VHS. Synopsis. 3 film students vanish after traveling into a Maryland forest to film a documentary on the local Blair Witch legend, leaving only their footage behind. The Blair Witch Project is one of the most successful independent movies ever made. It spawned countless knockoffs of the found footage variety and went down in history as one of the first films to really use the internet to get the word out. The idea was brilliant for its time, especially the hype that was built up around it and how they did it. They filmed it for only $60,000 over 8 days. It raked in over $248 million worldwide. So, they made their money back and then some. I think that's often forgotten by a lot of people when talking about this film. For better or worse, it redefined a whole era of horror. When this was first coming out, I remember being genuinely creeped out by the concept and the whole possibility of, is it real or not? Back in the day, I remember it being hotly debated for a while amongst my friends. We all found out after the fact, upon release, that it wasn't, and had a good laugh at the ride we were taking on. You may laugh at our naivety, especially those of you who've grown up with the internet as such a prevalent part of your lives. But it was all still fairly new to us back then, and those types of things hadn't been done to death yet. The film itself is okay, but what made it really special was the build-up and the rampant imagination that it tossed through your mind when thinking about it. Watching it now and knowing the full details, it does lose some of that magic. This is the first time in several years I've watched it, and while it's still a solid film, it doesn't quite hold up like it used to. If you've never seen it, give it a watch. If it's been a while, give it a watch. I would love to hear what everyone thinks, especially those of us who are old enough to be caught up in the hype when it first hit the scene. It feels to me like this is almost one of those forgotten films. You really don't hear many people talking about anymore. As far as the docu-horror genre goes, this is definitely one of the best. My rating for this film, 6 out of 10. IMDb's rating for this film, 6.4 out of 10. Now, this film is has a little bit of, I don't want to say controversy surrounding it, but it has a very love or hate relationship with fans, I guess. And that is 2000's Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2.
Last summer, after the crowds left, 5 strangers returned to the woods to uncover the truth. But one of them has a secret that will unlock the curse.
You know, if you don't believe in the Blair Witch, then why the hell did you bother to come?
I thought the movie was cool.
This fall, just in time for Halloween, the witch is back. Forget everything you've heard. Forget everything you've seen. Because this time, the truth is scarier than fiction.
A brutal murder in the Black Hills discovered today. In the past year, the Black Hills area has been overrun with movie fans wanting to get a glimpse of where the Blair Witch Project was filmed.
This film was directed by Joe Berlinger. The runtime is 90 minutes. It has an R rating. It stars Jeffrey Donovan, Stephen Barker, Turner, Erica Larson, and Kim Director. I watched this on VHS. The synopsis. A group of tourists arrives in Burkittsville, Maryland, after seeing the Blair Witch Project to explore the mythology and phenomenon, only to come face to face with their own neuroses and possibly the witch herself. I have only watched this one a handful of times, and it's probably been close to 10 years since the last time. I do remember kind of liking it and a handful of the scenes that stuck out, but it was one of those films that fell into a bit of a gray area with me. So, seeing I plan on doing a theme for my 31 Days of Horror, which this year is franchises, directors, and writers, I figured it was time to give it a revisit. This is a film that seems to be fairly maligned amongst horror fans. It's quite different from the Blair Witch Project, but has a lot of the same qualities. Personally, after rewatching it, I think the hate is unfair. While it's not quite on the same level, it's still enjoyable film. While it's not quite Jaws 1 and 2 as far as sequels go, I think of it as Jaws 2.5, but not quite 3. There's a lot to like about this film. I love the way the lost time thing comes into play and how it slowly unravels. You're not really sure what's going on, but you think you've got a good idea, but it never really reveals it to you. I like the fact they leave it unresolved, much like the first film. I didn't think the acting was bad, and they pulled off the characters well. The fact they played off of the hype of the first film, and that's why it's happening in the first place, was an interesting choice in setting up the story. But my biggest gripes were, at times it felt forced, like they were trying to push you in one direction or the other. They bounced between the characters a bit too quickly, especially once they reached the house. Just when the tension started to build, it felt like they cut to a different scene. I think they could have slow burned it a bit more in certain situations and it would have been more effective. The last thing, I felt like it was trying to say too much.
And what I mean by that is I think they were trying to push the perception of violent media breeds violent acts type of thing. That was definitely a hot button debate, and frankly, it still is. Maybe not so much these days as it once was. The problem with that being, the Blair Witch Project wasn't really a violent film. It was creepy, yes, violent, no. So I think that's a little off base. In the end, there was definitely more to like about this film than dislike. I think because the first film had such an impact on people, this one easily gets dismissed. It's good, solid fun, it doesn't drag out too long, and it's an interesting take on repercussions of the popularity of the first film. It had some big ideas and fell a little flat, but the effort was definitely there. It's a film I can appreciate for what it is. If you go into it with that mindset that it's not the Blair Witch Project and it's its own film, I think you'll enjoy it. My rating was a 5 out of 10. IMDb rating was a 4 out of 10. So, we are on to 1988's Cellar Dweller.
That's the ghost of Colin Childress. 30 years ago, he butchered a woman with an axe and then set himself on fire.
It's dark, it's gloomy, it's filled with terror.
Don't even think about going down there.
So why can't people stay out of the cellar?
I love being frightened.
If you love to be frightened, then this cellar is the place to be. Innocent woman is terrorized. Her life becomes a nightmare when she won't stay out of the basement and is snared by the evil Cellar Dweller.
This film was directed by John Carl Buechler, has a runtime of 77 minutes, it has an R rating, starring Yvonne DiCarlo, Deborah Ferrantino, and Brian Robbins, and Jeffrey Combs. I watched this on DVD. Synopsis. In the 1950s, a horror comics artist's creations come alive and kill him. Years later, a new cartoonist revives the creatures in his house, now part of an artist colony. This was my kickoff to the 2017 31 Days of Horror. I bought a 4-pack called Midnight Horror Movies 2 from Scream Factory. The 4-pack included Cellar Dweller, The Dungeon Master, which I reviewed a little while ago, Catacombs, and Contamination 7. I hadn't heard of any of these films before, but I figured for $5 and change it was worth snagging. Even if only one movie was decent, it was worth it. The film wasn't bad. Definitely had an early mid-80s Italian vibe to it as far as the cinematography went. The idea is pretty cool and original. It's not your standard slasher fare, but very much in that vein in the way it plays out. It's really more of a monster movie with a slasher aesthetic. The acting isn't bad, isn't great, but it's sufficient. The effects are middle of the road as well. They do the job, but don't look too awful, but aren't exactly top-notch. Kind of high C grade, low B grade. The film doesn't beat around the bush and gets right to the point. There definitely isn't a lot of wasted time, and it moves along very briskly. The gore is very limited. It has some standard 80s horror nudity. The film kind of just does its thing, doesn't strive to excel beyond that. It has that late 70s drive-in horror vibe in a lot of ways. If you took a Roger Corman flick and gave it an Italo Giallo facelift, and the way it's shot, you would have this film. Overall, Cellar Dweller is an okay film. I think it would actually be a good introduction for someone who's maybe isn't familiar with the genre and not quite ready for something more abrasive. It's tame by horror movie standards, but it has so many of those recognizable qualities that define the genre. My rating, 5 out of 10. The IMDb rating for this is a 5 out of 10. For those of you looking to check this out, the Scream Factory DVD is available with the aforementioned films, and I recommend you support that great company. But there is a full version on YouTube that you can watch. Just type in Cellar Dweller, and it should pop up. I have a couple films left that I want to talk about that I got to. And I was really in the mood for Sasquatch films. Anybody who knows me knows I am absolutely terrified of Sasquatch. That's just one of those things I've had like a phobia of ever since I was a little kid. And I've got to be in the right mood for it. And I watched a couple old favorites that I hadn't seen for a while. And the first one up is 1972's The Legend of Boggy Creek.
Here in this primitive river bottom wilderness in southern Arkansas, along with deer, duck, crane, and beaver, lurks a creature that walks upright. Whether it is a man, a monster, or a myth, no one really knows. What we do know is the people around Fouke, Arkansas say they have seen such a creature nearly 250 times since 1954. And that this creature, whatever it is, emits one of the most terrifying sounds ever recorded. The Legend of Boggy Creek, rated G.
This film was directed by Charles B. Pierce. It has a runtime of 85 minutes. It's rated G, starring Willie E. Smith, John P. Hickson, Vern Sturman. I watched this on Amazon Prime. The full film is available on YouTube as well. The synopsis: a documentary-style drama about the Fouke monster, a Bigfoot-type creature that has been sighted in and around Fouke, Arkansas, since the 1950s. Anyone who knows me knows I found Bigfoot stuff creepy. I have ever since I was a little kid. It's one of those things that seeped into my subconscious at an early age and has taken up residency ever since. This film is considered a classic by some. It's certainly probably the most famous Bigfoot movie. I'd also say it's a safe bet this was also one of the first documentary-style horror films. I also say horror film lightly. That might be a bit of a stretch. I've watched this one a few times over the years, but it has been a while. I figured it was a good time to revisit it. I really like this film, but I'll be honest, it's really not a great film. The way it was done was innovative, and I think that's part of the reason for the creepy vibe, but the film isn't really scary. Still, there's a certain charm about it. That's what pushes it above just being so-so, even if it is a bit campy. Not to mention, I absolutely love the poster art for this film. This is one that I need to have in my office, hanging on the wall with my collection of other posters. So it's one of those ones sooner or later I do need to get. It's one of those films that each time I watch it, my feelings don't change. This film, I think, was very much a product of its time. It was, I believe, at one point the highest grossing independent film of all time, or one of the highest grossing. There was something about that. There was something about it that captured people's imaginations, and I can see why. With the recent influx of Bigfoot-related shows and documentaries, I feel someone going in today might not appreciate it as much. Back then, I can see why it may have sparked the imagination and been considered creepy. If you are fascinated with the Sasquatch mythos as I am, this is worth a watch. You could watch it with younger kids. It would be a gentle and less abrasive introduction to horror than some fare. But go into it with mind that if it did anything to me, does anything to a younger crowd like it did to me, they're never going to want to go into the woods. My rating for this is a 6 out of 10, and that's probably being really generous. The IMDb rating is 4.9 out of 10. Fun fact, or side note, some of you may be familiar with the gloriously riffed Boggy Creek 2 and The Legend Continues, done by Mystery Science Theater 3000. This film was directed by the same person who directed and starred in Boggy Creek 2. Don't let the cheesiness of that film sway you from giving this one a shot. And last up is 1976, The Creature from Black Lake.
You really believe there's a creature?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I do.
Creature from Black Lake is coming to a theater near you. A Jim McCullough production, rated PG.
This film was directed by Joy and Houck Jr. Has a runtime of 91 minutes, rated PG, starring Jack Elam, Dub Taylor, and Dennis Fimple. Dennis Fimple was Grandpa in A House of a Thousand Corpses, just for those of you movie nerds, and that was his last role, if I remember correctly. I watched this on DVD. Synopsis: Louisiana swamp dwellers Jack Elam and Dub Taylor cross paths with college students in search of a Bayou Bigfoot. This is an old favorite of mine. I haven't seen it in about 5 or 6 years, though. I have to be in the right frame of mind for Bigfoot Sasquatch type flicks, like I previously mentioned. My viewing of Boggy Creek the other night spurred on what I assume is going to be a few films in this category for my 31 Days of Horror. I really like this film. I don't think it gets enough recognition because it's relatively unknown by a lot of people. While it's not a masterpiece, it is one of those films that I can watch over and over and not get sick of it. I think this might have been around my 8th or 9th viewing. I've lost track. My love of this film may be skewed a bit because of the subject matter, but there are plenty of bad films in this subgenre, so I don't think that's it. The acting is solid, the story is simple but effective, and the use of sound and lighting gives the film an unsettling vibe. It's a good film to watch with the lights turned down and the volume up. I'd love to see a high-definition scan of this film with lots of extras released on Blu-ray because I would snag it in a heartbeat. Creature of Black Lake is one of those lost gems from the mid-70s that deserve a little love. I'm talking to you, Scream Factory, Arrow, Code Red. One of you guys got to do something with this film because it needs some love and attention. It's highly recommended for fans of that era horror or anyone who likes Bigfoot Sasquatch films. This is easily one of the best of that subgenre. My rating for this film is a 7 out of 10. IMDb rating 4.6 out of 10. So you can see where myself and others have a little bit of a different, but you definitely need to give this a watch. This film is available to stream on both Amazon Prime and YouTube. So that's wrapping it up for week 1 of Average Joe's Drive-In's 31 Days of Horror. I'd like to thank my sponsor, the Maine Cannababes. You can check out their website, www.maincannababes.com. Don't forget to add the code word Average Joe's Drive-In for your chance to win a autographed picture of your favorite Maine Cannababe. I've got some upcoming stuff. October 21st and 22nd, I will be appearing at the Pine State Comic-Con in Bangor, Maine. I will be selling my novels and talking to anybody who wants to talk horror movies. So if you are in the Maine, New Hampshire, wherever, and you want to come out for a fun time, it's gonna be a lot of fun, and I look forward to it. This will probably be my last con or event of the year, so I'm looking forward to getting out once again and talking to all my horror nerd and nerdy friends and just having a really great time. And hopefully I'll sell some books and I'll autograph them for you and everything. Other than that, I've put down 3 more films for the 31 Days of Horror, and I have a bunch to watch coming up. So next week about this time, I will be doing another review. And don't forget, I have next Friday, I have is the Friday the 13th episode, which that is going to be an absolute blast, and I can't wait for that. I have Zach Thompson from They Call Me Legion will be coming in, and we're going to be discussing horror. There'll be some more review episodes. I had to change, unfortunately, a couple of the guests. One of my guests, at least, had to back out. I'm working on a replacement for that, so I'm not sure if there's going to be an episode Monday. There probably will, because I'll probably do another review episode, because by then I will have caught up on week 2. So, yeah, so that's it. Once again, you are listening to Average Joe's Drive-In. I'm your host, TJ Washburn, and I will see you sexy animals on the flip side.